By the time humanity finally earned a seat at a high-level alien peace summit, every single person back home expected fireworks. Not literal ones. This was diplomacy, not a war, but something dramatic. Speeches that would get quoted for centuries. Flags unfurling in zero gravity. A moment where we proved, once and for all, that we belonged among the stars. What nobody expected was paperwork. Mountains of it. Digital, holographic, color-coded paperwork. I'd been warned, of course. Don't assume anything, they told me. Alien cultures vary wildly. They made me sit through 6 months of cultural sensitivity briefings, watched 1,000 simulations of first contact disasters, and drilled one rule into my head harder than any other: stay professional no matter what. So when I stepped into the summit chamber, vast, quiet, filled with representatives who looked like evolution had taken a few creative risks, I was ready. Calm. Focused. Boring, even. I had my prepared statements cued, my translation implants synced, and my signature stylus calibrated to 6 different atmospheric pressures. This was supposed to be easy. The ambassador assigned to negotiate with me entered last. The room shifted when she did. Not dramatically, no gasps, no alarm, but there was a subtle recalibration, the way a space seems to recognize authority without being told. She moved with controlled confidence, posture precise, uniform immaculate in a way that suggested it was worn more for symbolism than necessity. I reminded myself not to stare. I failed immediately, but at least I did it politely. She greeted me formally, her voice smooth through the translator, every word measured. I responded in kind. We exchanged ceremonial acknowledgments, historical summaries, the kind of dialogue that could put a caffeinated lawyer to sleep. Exactly what I'd expected. Exactly what I wanted. Then she mentioned the ritual. She explained it calmly, like she was discussing seating arrangements or acceptable ink colors for legal documents. According to her, successful interspecies treaties required a demonstration of trust. Specifically, symbolic vulnerability. Her people believed that humans, as a species known for emotional reserve and physical barriers, only respected agreements when the other party demonstrated openness in a tangible way. I blinked. Once. Slowly. I opened my mouth to clarify, to ask a question, to do literally anything professional. The translator paused, processing. The room waited. Several non-human observers leaned forward, appendages twitching with interest. Before my response came out the other end, she took a step closer. Still calm. Still composed. Then she unzipped her uniform. Not dramatically. Not quickly. Just enough to make the action unmistakable and utterly, catastrophically inappropriate, at least by human standards. There was no flourish, no hesitation. To her, this was clearly procedure. The silence that followed wasn't shocked. It was attentive. I felt every survival instinct I'd ever developed light up at once. My brain ran through 1,000 responses and rejected all of them. Panic? Offensive. Laughter? Catastrophic. Looking away? Potentially disrespectful. Looking too long? Even worse. Across the chamber, several alien delegates began recording notes. One adjusted a device and nodded approvingly. The translator finally caught up. Your restraint, it announced, is noted as a sign of disciplined dominance. That was not what I tried to say. I forced my expression into something neutral, which apparently read as impressive stoicism to everyone except me. My heart was doing acrobatics. This was not in the briefing. There was no slide titled What to Do if the ambassador unzips. She watched me carefully, not with mischief, but with curiosity. There was sincerity there. This mattered to her. That somehow made it worse. I attempted to regain control of the situation with words, careful ones, respectful ones, but each sentence came back filtered through cultural assumptions I hadn't known existed. My polite deflection was interpreted as ceremonial humility. My request for clarification became evidence of emotional depth. Someone in the back emitted a pleased clicking sound. I could practically hear my superiors screaming across the void. Still, I stayed seated. I kept my hands on the table. I did not run. Apparently, this cemented something important, because her posture softened, just a fraction. Approval, maybe? Or relief. This openness, she said, adjusting her uniform with deliberate slowness, demonstrates my commitment to peace. I nodded, because nodding felt safer than speaking. Inside, though, something strange happened. The initial shock began to fade, replaced by a reluctant understanding. She wasn't trying to provoke me. She wasn't mocking me. This wasn't seduction, not really, not as humans defined it. This was her best attempt at respect. The idea was absurd. The execution was mortifying. But the intent was genuine. The room buzzed quietly with analysis and recording. A historic moment, apparently. Humanity's first major treaty negotiation was being redefined in real time, and somehow, my refusal to visibly lose my mind had elevated us to near mythical status. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that this was now part of the record. Whatever happened next, whatever compromises we made, whatever peace we forged, would be built on this moment. On the assumption that humans were unshakable, unreadable, and dangerously composed. I swallowed, straightened my shoulders, and prepared to speak again. If this was how the galaxy thought we did diplomacy, then I was going to have to survive it without blinking. And somehow, without making it any worse. I tried again, carefully this time, choosing words like I was defusing a bomb with a spoon. I thanked her for her commitment. I acknowledged the importance of trust. I emphasized mutual respect and shared goals. Very normal. Very safe. The translator waited a beat, then projected my words into the chamber. Human delegate expresses gratitude for the ambassador's courage and confirms acceptance of the vulnerability exchange at its current level. At its current level. I froze. Somewhere behind me, something clapped. Not hands, more like flexible plates striking together, but the sentiment was unmistakable. Approval rippled through the chamber. I could feel it like a pressure change. The ambassador inclined her head, clearly pleased. Your people are as disciplined as the data suggested, she said. Many species would have reacted, impulsively. That was one word for it. I opened my mouth to correct the misunderstanding, then closed it again when I noticed several delegates adjusting their recording devices, lenses narrowing, antennae angling toward me. This wasn't just a negotiation anymore. This was a case study. Before we proceed, I said slowly, it may help to clarify certain cultural assumptions. The translator hummed. The ambassador gestured for me to continue, settling back into her seat with a grace that suggested she was completely at ease. The uniform remained partially unfastened. I made a heroic effort to focus on her face. In human diplomacy, I said, vulnerability is usually expressed through words. Transparency. Intent. Not. I paused, searching for a neutral term that wouldn't get me executed by protocol review boards back home. Not through physical gestures. The translator clicked again. Human delegate asserts that verbal restraint is a higher form of exposure. It announced. Physical vulnerability unnecessary when emotional discipline is present. The room went very, very quiet. Then the note-taking intensified. I stared straight ahead, my soul briefly leaving my body to consider early retirement. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw one alien scribble something emphatically, underlining it twice. Another adjusted a holographic display labeled Human Negotiation Doctrine. The ambassador studied me with renewed interest. Not predatory. Analytical. Appreciative. Fascinating, she said. So you are saying that by remaining composed, you reveal more of yourself than by shedding protection? Yes, I said, because that was close enough to the truth to be survivable. That's exactly what I'm saying. She leaned forward slightly. Not much. Just enough that I became painfully aware of how closely she was watching me now. In that case, she said, your restraint is even more meaningful than I realized. This was spiraling. gracefully, academically, irreversibly spiraling. One of the observers raised a limb. Request for clarification. It buzzed. Is the human demonstrating dominance through denial of instinct? No, I said quickly. The translator betrayed me again. Human confirms denial of instinct is foundational to species hierarchy. I closed my eyes for half a second. Just a half. Apparently that was acceptable, because no alarms went off. The ambassador smiled. Not broadly. Her species didn't really do broad smiles, but there was warmth there. Respect. Something else, too. Curiosity edged with admiration. You are unlike the projections, she said. Our studies suggested humans would either withdraw or escalate. Those are popular options, I admitted. A soft sound passed through her throat, the closest thing I'd heard yet to laughter. The room reacted with interest. Someone tagged the audio. She adjusted her uniform, not to further remove it, to my immense relief, but to settle it more comfortably, as if the ritual had reached a satisfactory phase. That small mercy felt enormous. I should explain, she said, lowering her voice slightly. Our historical encounters have taught us that concealment often precedes betrayal. Openness discourages violence. That, at least, made sense. In a sideways, interstellar sort of way. In our history, I replied, openness without consent usually leads to conflict of a different kind. The translator hesitated longer this time, then rendered it carefully. The ambassador listened, head tilted, absorbing the nuance. Consent, she repeated. A voluntary threshold. Yes, I said. One that matters. For the first time since she'd entered the chamber, her confidence wavered, not disappeared, just shifted. The authoritative certainty gave way to something more personal. Thoughtful. That was not emphasized in our training, she admitted. I believed her. Completely. Around us, the summit continued to hum, delegates whispering, recording, revising assumptions in real time. Humanity's reputation was mutating by the second, and I was the unfortunate patient zero. The ambassador straightened. Then perhaps, she said, we should proceed with a hybrid approach. My stomach dropped. Hybrid how? Professional formality, she said, supported by intentional transparency. She met my eyes and held them, unflinching. I wish to understand your boundaries, she added. Not to cross them. That landed harder than anything else she'd said. I nodded slowly. And I want this treaty to mean something. Not just politically. The translator rendered that one without embellishment, thank God. For a moment, the chaos receded. The misunderstanding didn't vanish, but it stopped growing teeth. We were two individuals now, not symbols being projected onto a galactic screen. She sat back, composed once more, though the atmosphere between us had changed. Warmer. Charged in a way that had nothing to do with rituals or uniforms. Then let us continue, she said. Carefully. The room exhaled as one. I had no idea how we were going to get out of this with our dignity intact. But for the first time since she'd unzipped her uniform, I suspected that maybe, just maybe, we were finally negotiating the same thing. Once the immediate chaos settled into something resembling order, the room took on a different rhythm. The observers were still there, still watching, but the frantic note-taking slowed. The treaty drafts hovered patiently between us, clauses glowing softly, waiting to be acknowledged. I'd never been so aware of silence in my life. Not empty silence, expectant silence, like the pause before a punchline or a confession. She was studying me again, not as a representative now, but as a person. I could feel it. Her species didn't stare the way humans did, but attention had weight regardless of biology, and hers pressed gently but insistently against me. There is something else, she said at last. A contextual disclosure. That phrase alone sent a ripple through the chamber. A few observers perked up again, devices half raised, unsure whether this was more data or more ritual. I nodded. Go ahead. Our understanding of humans, she continued, is incomplete. Fragmented. You are difficult to model. She didn't say it as criticism. If anything, there was admiration threaded through her tone. Your media suggests contradiction. Aggression paired with restraint. Intimacy paired with distance. You present yourselves loudly, yet guard yourselves fiercely. I huffed a quiet breath. That sounds about right. She inclined her head. This has given rise to a belief among several member species. She paused, just long enough to make me uneasy. That humans are emotionally hazardous. That got a reaction. A low murmur passed through the room. Someone's translator pinged in surprise. Hazar, I started. Not in a hostile sense, she clarified. In the sense that prolonged exposure leads to attachment, confusion, and altered priorities. I stared at her. Of all the reputations we could have earned, warmongers, upstarts, chaos apes, this one caught me completely off guard. You think we're contagious, I said. She considered that. Emotionally, she said. Yes. I couldn't help it. I laughed. A short, incredulous sound that echoed a little too loudly in the chamber. Several heads turned. The ambassador didn't flinch. If anything, her posture relaxed further. That reaction, she said, is precisely the problem. I wiped at my face, trying to regain composure. We don't do it on purpose. I believe you, she replied. But intention does not negate effect. There it was again, that sincerity. She wasn't accusing. She was explaining. Sharing. And something in her expression told me this wasn't pulled from a briefing packet. You didn't learn this from a manual, I said quietly. Her gaze held mine. No. The chamber seemed to fall away. Not literally, I was very aware this was still being recorded, but emotionally, the distance between us shortened. She tapped a control on the table, and the ambient sound dampened slightly. Privacy, or the closest thing the summit allowed. I requested this assignment, she said. Specifically. That raised my eyebrows. Because of the rituals? Because of humans, she corrected. Because of you. That one landed square in my chest. She didn't rush to explain. Let the words exist between us unpadded. Brave in its own way. When she did continue, her voice was steadier than I felt. I studied your species extensively. Your negotiations, your conflicts, your alliances. Humans form bonds quickly under pressure. You adapt emotionally as fast as you do strategically. Her mouth curved slightly. I found that compelling. I shifted in my seat, suddenly very aware that this was drifting far from standard diplomatic protocol. Compelling enough to rewrite your opening ritual? Yes, she said simply. I believe direct vulnerability would meet you on equal footing. And now? I asked. She exhaled, a controlled release that mirrored human behavior uncannily well. Now I believe I misunderstood the nature of your strength. That was my opening. I leaned forward just a fraction, matching her earlier posture. We're not as controlled as we look, I said. We just choose when to open up. Who to open up to. The translator handled that one cleanly. Bless it. Her eyes softened. Not dramatically. Just enough to change the air between us. That choice, she said, is more intimate than I realized. It can be, I agreed. Another pause. Longer this time. Charged, but not uncomfortable. The kind of pause where something could tip either way. I hope I did not cause you distress, she said. That was not my intention. You caused confusion, I said. Then, because honesty felt like the only currency that worked anymore, I added. And embarrassment. But not distress. Her shoulders eased. That is reassuring. I should probably admit something too, I said. Back home, they warned me aliens might be unpredictable. And are we? She asked, a hint of amusement creeping in. Absolutely, I said. But not in the way they meant. That soft, almost laugh sound returned. The observers noticed. Someone flagged it again. I decided not to care. The treaty draft pulsed gently between us, as if reminding us it still existed. She glanced at it, then back at me. If we proceed, she said, I would like to do so with mutual clarity. No assumptions. No rituals that have not been agreed upon. I nodded. That's how we usually do our best work. And afterward? She asked. When the summit concludes? The question wasn't diplomatic. Not really. The translator hesitated, then rendered it faithfully. I met her gaze. Afterward, we see what understanding looks like without an audience. Her pupils widened slightly. A biological tell, subtle but unmistakable. That, she said, is an intriguing proposal. Around us, the galaxy waited. Future historians would likely argue about when the balance truly shifted, when humanity stopped being an outsider and became something else entirely. I suspected they'd missed the real moment. It wasn't when she unzipped her uniform. It was when we both chose, deliberately, to keep everything else exactly where it was, and still leaned in. By the time we returned our attention to the treaty, the chamber felt different. Not calmer exactly, too many species, too much history in the room for calm, but aligned. Like a ship whose thrusters had finally stopped fighting each other. She gestured, and the draft expanded between us, clauses rearranging themselves in response to our earlier exchanges. It was adaptive, reactive to intent as much as language. I'd been briefed on that technology, but seeing it respond to something as intangible as mutual understanding was unsettling in the best way. I propose an amendment, she said. A clarification of symbolic exchange. I braced myself. All right. Rather than physical exposure, she continued, the treaty will recognize voluntary disclosure of strategic limitations, historical failures, and emotional context as the highest form of vulnerability. The room erupted, not loudly, but intensely. Rapid murmurs. Spikes of light from data streams recalculating probabilities. This wasn't just acceptable. It was revolutionary. I felt a slow grin tug at my mouth. You're redefining half your diplomatic doctrine. Yes, she said. Incorporating a human variable. I glanced at the observers. They're going to blame me for this. They already do, she replied, with unmistakable dry humor. I agreed to the amendment, adding our own provisions in return. Mutual transparency. Consent-based cultural exchange. A clause that explicitly prohibited unsolicited ceremonial disrobing, which earned a brief pause from the translator before it rendered the concept in 3 different linguistic frameworks. The ambassador watched my face closely as it did. Necessary? She asked. Very, I said. The clause was accepted unanimously. When it came time to sign, there was no fanfare. No ritual. Just 2 representatives leaning forward, stylus and biometric field aligning, committing their worlds to peace the human way, deliberately, consciously, without spectacle. The chamber exhaled again, louder this time. The treaty locked. Somewhere, a bell chimed, marking the official moment humanity became something more than a provisional curiosity. The observers dispersed slowly, already transmitting summaries, interpretations, warnings. I caught fragments as they passed. Emotional restraint as leverage. Human refusal to escalate. Caution, perceived intimacy may be strategic. I almost corrected them. Almost. She stood, smoothing her uniform fully back into place, the earlier incident already receding into history. Up close, without the weight of ceremony between us, she seemed lighter. Still authoritative, but no longer armored. Our agreement includes a post-signing interval, she said quietly. An opportunity for representatives to engage without formal observation. I checked the chamber. Most delegates were gone now, leaving behind only environmental systems and a few exhausted aides. That was very forward-thinking of you. It was intentional, she replied. We moved to a side alcove, a space designed for decompression rather than negotiation. The lighting softened automatically. The background noise dropped to a gentle hum. No recording indicators glowed. For the first time since I'd arrived, I let myself breathe. I want to be clear, I said. Back there, none of that defines how I see you. She tilted her head. Clarify. I don't see you as a ritual, I said. Or a misunderstanding. I see you as someone who took a risk. Her gaze held mine, steady and searching. And I see you as someone who refused to exploit it. We stood there for a moment, close enough to feel each other's presence without crossing any lines. The tension was still there, but it had changed shape. Less volatile. More promising. You know, I said. Back home, they're going to analyze this summit for decades. They will reach many incorrect conclusions, she said. Almost certainly. She hesitated, then extended a hand, not in her culture's formal greeting, but in a careful imitation of ours. I took it, surprised by how natural it felt. This alliance, she said, will alter the balance of the council. Human specialty, I said. Showing up and making things complicated. Her mouth curved again, that subtle expression I was starting to recognize as amusement. You do it with remarkable charm. We released hands, reluctantly. Duty had a way of reasserting itself, even after moments like this. As we prepared to part, she paused. There will be future negotiations. I figured, I said. I would prefer, she added, that you be involved. I met her eyes. Professionally? She considered that. Initially. That was as close as either of us came to making a promise. It was enough. When I finally left the summit chamber, messages were already flooding in. Congratulations. Questions. Alarmed requests for clarification about why several alien cultures had just revised their training manuals to include a section titled Human Emotional Protocols. Handle with care. I didn't answer any of them right away. Instead, I looked back once, just long enough to see her watching me go. Not as an ambassador. Not as a symbol. As someone curious about what came next. Humanity's first major treaty hadn't been sealed with force or fear or even spectacle. It had been sealed with restraint, honesty, and the mutual decision not to assume the worst. Later, historians would argue about power shifts and diplomatic innovations. They'd debate whether humans were truly as dangerous as the rumors suggested. I'd let them. Because the truth was simpler. She'd asked me to sign a treaty. And instead of losing my composure, I'd found something far more unsettling. Understanding. And maybe, if the galaxy survived a few more summits, something more.